สวัสดีค่ะ วันนี้เรามาอ่านเรื่องภาษาอังกฤษกันต่อ The Written House in the Big Wood เป็น chapter ที่ 8 part 1 เป็นเรื่องที่เล่าถึงเรื่องราวสมัยก่อนของอเมริกา ตอนที่ 8 ว่าอย่างไรบ้าง เรามาฟังกันค่ะ Dance at Grandpa's Monday morning, everybody get up early.In a hurry to get started to Grandpa's. Pa wanted to be there to help with the work of gathering and boiling the sap. Ma would help Grandma and the aunts make good things to eat for all the people who were coming to the dance. Breakfast was eaten, and the dishes washed, and the beds.Made by lamplight. Pa packed his fiddle carefully in its box and put it in the big sled that was already waiting at the gate. The air was cold and frosty, and the light was gray when Laura and Mary and Ma with baby Carrie were tucked in the snook.and warm under the ropes on the straw in the bottom of the sled. The horses shook their heads and pranced, making the sled bells sing merrily, and away they went on the road through the big woods to Grandpa's. The snow was damp and smooth in the road.So the sled slipped quickly over it, and the big trees seemed to be hurrying by on either side. After a while, there was sunshine in the woods, and the air sparkled. The long streaks of yellow light lay between the shadows of the tree trunks.And the snow was colored faintly pink. All the shadows were thin and blue, and every little curve of snowdrift and every little track in the snow has a shadow. Pa showed Laura the tracks of the wild creatures in the snow at the sides of the road. The small,leaping tracks of cottontail rabbits, the tiny tracks of field mice, and the feather-stitching tracks of snowbirds. There were larger tracks, like dogs' tracks, where foxes and run, and there were the tracks of the deer that had barred away in the woods.The air was growing warmer already, and Pa said that the snow wouldn't last long. It did not seem long until they were sweeping into the clearing of Grandpa's house. All the street bells jingled. Grandma came to the door and stood there smiling, calling to them to come in.She said that Grandpa and Uncle George were already at work out in the maple woods. So Pa went to help them while Laura and Mary and Ma, with baby Carrie in her arms, went into Grandma's house and took off their wraps. Laura loved Grandma's house.It was much larger than their house at home. There was one great big room, and then there was a little room that belonged to Uncle George, and there was another room for the aunts, Aunt Docia and Aunt Ruby. And then there was the kitchen with the big cook stove. It was fun to run the whole length of the big room, from the large fireplace at one end all the way to Grandma's bed. Under the window in the other end, the floors were made of white, thick slabs that Grandpa had hewed from the log with his egg. The floor was smoothed all over and scrubbed clean and white, and the big bed under the window was soft with feathers. The days seemed very short while Aurora and Mary played in the big room, and Ma helped Grandma and the aunts in the kitchen. The men had taken their dinner to the maple woods, so for dinner they did not set the table, but ate cold venison sandwich and drank milk. But for supper, Grandma made hasty pudding. She stood by the stove, sifting the yellow cornmeal from her fingers into a kettle of boiling, salted water. She stirred the water all the time with a big wooden spoon, and sipped in the milk until the kettle was full of the thick, yellow, bubbling mass. Then she set it on the back of the stove, where it would cook slowly. It smelled good. The whole house smelled good, with the sweet and spicy smell from the kitchen, and the smell of the hickory logs burning with clear, bright flames in the fireplace, and the smell of the clove apple beside Grandma's mending basket on the table. The sunshine came in through the sparkling window panes, and everything was large and spacious and clean. At supper time, Pa and Grandpa came from the woods. Each had on his shoulder a wooden yoke that Grandpa had made. It was cut to fit around their necks in the back, and hollowed out to fit over their shoulder. From each end hung a chain with a hook, and on each hook hung a big wooden bucket full of hot maple syrup. Pa and Grandpa had brought the syrup from the big kettle in the woods. They steadied the bucket with their hands, but the weight hung from the yokes on their shoulders. Grandma made room for a huge brass kettle on the stove. Pa and Grandpa poured the syrup into the brass kettle, and it was so large that it held all the syrup from the 4 big buckets. Then Uncle George came with a small bucket of syrup, and everybody ate the hot, hasty pudding with maple syrup for supper. Uncle George was home from the army. He wore his blue army coat with the brass bottom, and he had merry blue eyes. He was big and broad, and he walked with a swagger. Laura looked at him all the time. She was eating her hasty pudding because she had heard Pa say to Ma that he was wild. George is wild since he came back from the war, Pa had said, shaking his head as if he were sorry. But it couldn't be helped. Uncle George had run away to be drummer boy in the army. when he was 14 years old. Laura had never seen a white man before. She didn't know whether she was afraid of Uncle George or not. When supper was over, Uncle George went outside the door and blew his army bugle, long and round. It made a lovely ringing sound far away through the big woods. The woods were dark and silent, and the trees stood still as thought they were listening. Then from very far away the sound came back, thin and clear and small, like a little bugle answering the big one. "Listen," Uncle George said. "Isn't that pretty?" Laura looked at him, but she did not say anything. And when Uncle George stopped blowing the bugle, she ran into the house. Ma and Grandma cleared away the dishes and washed them, and swept the hearth, while Aunt Dorsey and Aunt Ruby made themselves pretty in their room. Laura sat on their bed and watched them comb out their long hair and part it carefully. They parted it from their foreheads to the nape of their neck, and then they parted it across from ear to ear. They braided their back hair in long braids, and then they did not braid up carefully in big knots. They had washed their hands and face and scrubbed them well with soap. At the wash basin on the bench in the kitchen, they had used store soap, not the slimy, soft, dark brown soap that Grandma made and kept in a big jar to use for common every day. They fussed for a long time with their front hair, holding up the lamp and looking at their hair in the little looking glass that hung on the rock wall. They brushed it so smooth on each side of the straight white part that it shone like silver in the lamplight. The little puff on each side shone too, and the ends were broad and twisted neatly under the big knot in the back.